Hello, bonjour, Alberta. Did you know that at least 238,000 people speak Français in Alberta? And those numbers just keep on growing? Oui, oui, c'est vrai, it's true. And thanks to Shaw TV Community Access Programming, we get to reach out to everyone to let you know all about special people, places, events, and activities happening right here in this great province, in both English and en français. That's right, mes amis. We begin the first part of our program in English, and then we repeat it en français. So stay with us. Restez à l'écoute.
Bienvenue and welcome to 2016 and the 10th season of Hello Bonjour Alberta. We're recording in the context of Les Rendez-vous de la Francophonie, and we have a really special treat in this episode. We have the Chancellor of the University of Calgary, former astronaut, Dr. Robert Thirsk. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this one for a while, haven't we, Anne?
Absolutely.
I'm Marc Lalonde, by the way.
And I'm Anne Boiteau, your host for tonight.
You bet. And let's find out who you are, Dr. Thirsk, or Bob. Where were you born, and how did your life evolve to become an astronaut and the Chancellor?
I was born in British Columbia, and by the way, please call me Bob. I can remember one day I went into my grade 3 classroom, and the teacher turned on the classroom radio, and all of us, including me, listened to the voice of an astronaut in space at that moment. And that was a remarkable day for me. It was the first day in my life I heard the term space and heard the term astronaut. And the teacher used that as a learning opportunity. Caught my attention, and I decided in grade 3 that I'd sure like to be an astronaut if I had the opportunity.
Oh, wow. So from British Columbia, you went to elementary school there, and then...
I went to elementary school in British Columbia. My father was in sales, so we moved around to quite a few small towns in British Columbia. We moved to Calgary for junior high, R.T. Alderman Junior High, Lord Beaverbrook High School, and then I completed my first university degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Calgary, where I'm now Chancellor.
Oh, wow, so it's a big
And you
cycle.
learned French while you were here in Calgary?
Yes. You know, I am strong in the sciences, in the maths, Anne, but one of the things that I struggle in is languages. So all that means is I need more determination. I put a little bit more extra work in that. And yes, high school at university in Calgary was a place where I learned French.
So, and you also learned Russian, right?
Yes, later in life, once I was assigned to fly on an international mission that included Russian cosmonauts as crewmates, it was necessary to learn Russian. It was a pleasure to do so as well.
And was that more difficult than French?
Oh, the Russians always make things complicated.
All right, well, we won't cause
go there.
an international incident here with that. I have a kind of a similar background. I, after watching the moon landings, told my father I wanted to be an astronaut. And he said, well, you need two things. You need to be short, so you got that. And you need to memorize these encyclopedias, which, you know, back then was just a huge list.
They weren't online. No.
So, you know, I think I read through the first half or whatever. So, and now, in encyclopedias about space, you're actually in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. So did you have to memorize the encyclopedia?
Well, it felt like it, Mark. You know, going to school is very, very similar to astronaut training. We spend hours in laboratories, we spend hours in classrooms. We read it in space encyclopedias, training manuals, but we also use simulators, and part of the training for an astronaut, not just mental, some of it's physical as well. So physical training is important.
So what's the process?
What's the selection process?
Exactly.
Yes. Once you decide yourself, that's what you want to do.
So I can remember one day I was working as a physician in New Brunswick, and I opened up the newspaper in the doctor's lounge, and there was this ad about this big saying Canada was now ready to start an astronaut program, and they were looking for people with certain qualifications. So this grade 3 dream that I mentioned to you came back to me. A lot of the qualifications I had, thanks to my education at the University of Calgary and other institutions. So I applied. The next day, my application was in the mail. But 4,000 other people did it as well. So it was a long selection process, about 6 months long or so. And it got down to a final 19 people, interviews, medical exams, very exhausting. And for whatever reason, I was selected.
And also selected because of your education and your talents and that sort of thing?
Yes, there are a lot of young people
Specific?
today would like to become astronauts of the future. So they ask me, you know, what does it take to become an astronaut? So that's exactly what I say. First of all, you need a strong background in a science or an engineering or medical discipline, obviously in aviation and perhaps in education. At least one university degree is required. Secondly, you need to be in good health. So there are certain medical problems you could have on Earth which would disqualify you, unfortunately, from being an astronaut. And I would go so far to say that it's also important to be in good physical shape as well. Astronaut training is rigorous. We can get ourselves into situations during an actual space flight where we need brute force or we need cardiac aerobic conditioning. And then the last thing I would say is you need to have a certain psychological profile and personality traits. So people who are good team players, good leaders, good followers, who have cross-cultural skills would make superb astronauts, and obviously a sense of adventure.
Because you mentioned to us earlier that your second mission lasted 6 months with the same crew members?
Yeah, so you have to consider that
So-
a space vehicle is an isolated and confined environment. Living aboard a spacecraft is not like staying at a Four Seasons hotel. It's pretty rustic. If you enjoy wilderness camping, then you would probably do well in space. We sleep in sleeping bags. There's no dishwasher. There's no bathtub. There's no fridge. We end up eating a lot of camping type food. I brought along a few samples today.
Yeah, if you can show us some of those.
So there is, as I mentioned, there's no freezer, there's no fridge aboard the spacecraft. So all of our food needs to have a long shelf life. This, for example, is shrimp cocktail. It's dehydrated, and it's actually one of my favorites. And what I would do, I'd inject cold water into it. Once the water's in there, I'd work the water around so the food could absorb it. And then when I'm ready to eat, I'd get a pair of scissors and carefully open up the package, and with a spoon, try to eat the shrimp without them floating away and getting into the electronics.
That's right, because when you put the food on the spoon, there's nothing holding the food in the spoon.
Well, it's just a little bit of surface tension, but you know, just a small little jerk on the spoon and your
Off it
shrimp
goes.
cocktail could go the far end of the space station.
Okay, so be honest with us. Do food fights happen on the space station?
Well, I wouldn't call them food fights, Mark, but I would take the shrimp out of here and I'd say, hey, Mark, ready? And I'd shoot a shrimp at you. And it takes a little bit of an adaptation to get the accuracy right, because we don't have the arc that you normally have when you throw a baseball or a
Right, so
shrimp.
it's pretty
yes.
much straight across. I see.
Direct
Can I show you
into
the
your
drinks
mouth.
as well?
Yeah.
So this is a drink. Again, it's in the bottom of the drink container. It's all airtight. Would be crystals, in this case, peach apricot drink. I would add a certain number of milliliters of cold water to the package. When I'm ready to drink, I'd put the straw into the aperture, and when I'm ready to drink, I'd open up the valve, take my sip, and then before it leaves my mouth, I'd close the valve again so that the peach apricot drink doesn't escape. That's the proper way to drink in space. What we'd sometimes do when the people weren't looking, we squeeze the drink out of the package until we have a ball of orange juice or whatever, and then we'd go up to the floating ball and drink it that way.
Drink it right out of the air.
That's definitely cannot do that on Earth.
Right, right.
So 6 months, how big is the space station or where you were for 6 months?
It's actually quite
Exactly.
large. A lot of people had asked me if I had claustrophobia in space. I did not. And one is we're selected, people with claustrophobia are selected out during a recruitment. But secondly, the station is actually quite large now. If you look at it from the outside, it's the equivalent in area to 2 CFL football fields side by side.
Oh, okay.
And the living space for astronauts is equivalent to about well, maybe a 2-bedroom home.
Okay.
And then the other thing I want to emphasize is that in space, you can make use of the entire volume. So look at us here in the studio. We're seated here, but look at all this wasted space here and up here where we could have, you know, another 5 astronauts seated as well. So space opens up
Yes.
in space.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So it wasn't a problem.
Okay, so enough private space for each astronaut.
Yes, each of us would have a sleep station. It's about the size of a coffin. And we would go in there at night, of course, to sleep. Our sleeping bag would be in there. But you make a good point, Anne. It's important that even though you enjoy being with your crewmates all day long, it's important to get 30 minutes of quiet, reflective time every day to be alone, to check your email from home and give a phone call home to the children, see how they're doing, and just think about this incredible adventure that we're on. So taking time in privacy is really important to be mentally well adjusted to the adventure.
Before we talk about the University of Calgary and your role there, tell us a bit about the views, because you mentioned earlier when you were speaking about how wonderful it was to be looking out the window.
I can remember my first view of the Earth on my first space flight, and even though I was well trained for all of the procedures that I would be doing in space and all the emergency situations I could possibly get into, no one properly prepared me for the beautiful view of the Earth from space. You can see the Earth. We're not flying high enough that we can see the entire Earth, but you can certainly see that
The curvature, yes.
it is a sphere. And then the blue of the ocean is my favorite color now. Deserts are brown, but there are 100 shades of brown, there are 100 shades of red, there are 100 shades of orange. The most beautiful country on the planet is Canada, with the dark green of our forests, the blues of our rivers and of our lakes. And then beyond the Earth is nothing for hundreds of millions of kilometers, just black, inky nothingness. So you get this sense of beauty,
Contrast, yes.
but you also get this sense of fragility as well.
Yes.
Talk about the university now. Tell us a bit about your role. We don't have much time left, a couple of minutes. Your role as Chancellor.
I mentioned to you that I'm a graduate of the University of Calgary. It has played a definite role in the direction that my educational path and my career path went. I'm very grateful. But I got a phone call a couple of years ago from the university, and they said, "We'd like you to become our chancellor." So I thought that a chancellor was the person who shows up twice a year at convocation, at the graduation ceremony, and shakes hands, and that's it. At the University of Calgary, that is true, but it's more than that. I'm the ambassador. I'm the champion for the university and the Southern Alberta community. I'm an advocate for lifelong learning. I'm a living example of the kind of career one can have if you pursue education and structure an educational plan to match your dream, your vision. But I also work with a wonderful group of people at the university called senators. These are citizens from Calgary who are also just as fond of the university and its role in our city as I am. And we try to strengthen those ties between the university and the community, the arts community, the culture community, the information community, the broadcasting community, the literature community, the corporate community. Strengthen those ties so the university ecosystem is strengthened. So in a nutshell, I'm the link between the university and the community.
So you get out a fair bit, and we can expect to see you in the city of Calgary at various events in the future?
Absolutely. I'm often invited to go to schools and to speak at Rotary clubs and at Canadian clubs, and I'm pleased to do that.
We look forward to that. Thanks so much for joining us, Bob. We really appreciate it. Thanks to our volunteers who put this show together, and thanks to our viewers for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Stay with us. On continue en français.